The courtroom fell silent as Judge Wallace Bridger adjusted his glasses, a smirk playing across his face as he stared down at the 94-year-old legend standing before him. Clint Eastwood, who had faced countless adversaries on screen, now found himself facing something different. A judge who saw nothing but an aging actor trying to play lawyer. "Mr. Eastwood," the judge's voice dripped with condescension, "you do understand that legal proceedings aren't like your Hollywood scripts, don't you? There are rules, procedures." He paused, letting out a small chuckle. "It's not as simple as delivering a monologue and riding off into the sunset." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled frantically, already imagining their headlines. One even whispered, "This is going to be gold." The opposition's lawyer couldn't hide his smirk. Everyone was ready to witness what they thought would be a spectacular failure. But they didn't know Clint Eastwood. Not really. The legendary actor stood there, calm and unwavering, his blue eyes locked onto the judge. The same eyes that had stared down countless villains on screen now held something the judge hadn't expected: absolute certainty. What happened next would stun not just the judge, but the entire courtroom, because Clint Eastwood was about to prove that age isn't just a number. It's a weapon when you know how to use it. Before we reveal how Clint Eastwood turned the tables on this arrogant judge, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's dive into one of the most incredible courtroom moments you've never heard about. The judge leaned forward, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Tell me, Mr. Eastwood, where exactly did you study law?" More laughter echoed through the courtroom. Someone in the back whispered, "Poor old man's lost his mind." But Clint didn't flinch, didn't even blink. At 94, he had seen enough in life to know that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the cards. "You know," the judge continued, tapping his gavel thoughtfully, "most men your age are enjoying retirement, watching reruns of their old movies. Yet here you are, thinking you can handle a complex legal case on your own." He shook his head, almost pitying. "Are you sure you wouldn't rather have a real attorney handle this?" The opposition's lawyer, Gerald Parker, couldn't contain his smirk anymore. He leaned back in his expensive chair, already tasting victory. After all, how could an aging actor possibly stand against his years of legal expertise? But something in Clint's eyes made the judge pause. There was no anger there, no embarrassment, just that same steady gaze that had made him a legend on screen. The courtroom waited, holding its breath, as Clint slowly reached for his briefcase. What he pulled out next would wipe the smirk off everyone's face. Because while they had been busy laughing at his age, Clint Eastwood had been preparing something that would change everything. "Your Honor." Clint's voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of decades of wisdom. "Before you continue questioning my capabilities," he paused, and for the first time, a hint of a smile crossed his face. "There's something you should see." As Clint opened the folder, the room leaned forward in anticipation. Not just any folder, but 6 months of meticulous preparation that was about to silence every doubter in that courtroom. "Your Honor," Clint's voice remained steady, "I'm here because a wealthy developer thought he could steal what wasn't his. They built their luxury condos on my land in Carmel, thinking an old man wouldn't notice. Or maybe," he paused, his eyes meeting the judge's, "they thought an old man wouldn't fight back." The developer, Gerald Madsen, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His attorney, Parker, quickly whispered something in his ear, but Clint wasn't finished. "They sent me letters," Clint continued, pulling out document after document, each one more damning than the last, offering to buy the land after they'd already started building on it. When I refused, they tried to bury me in paperwork, thinking I'd get confused and give up. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's smirk had faded slightly, replaced by something else: curiosity. "You see, Your Honor," Clint's voice took on an edge that made everyone sit up straighter. "They made 3 mistakes. First, they underestimated me because of my age. Second, they built on land that wasn't theirs. But their biggest mistake?" He pulled out one final document, holding it up for all to see. They didn't know what I've been doing for the past 6 months. Parker suddenly stood up, his confidence wavering for the first time. Your Honor, whatever Mr. Eastwood is about to present. But the judge raised his hand, silencing him. His eyes were fixed on the document in Clint's hand. What exactly have you been doing, Mr. Eastwood? Clint's response would make headlines across the country, because what no one knew, what no one had bothered to ask, was that this 94-year-old Hollywood legend had spent the last half-year preparing something that would change everything. For the past 6 months, Clint's voice filled the silent courtroom. I've studied every property law in California that applies to this case, every precedent, every ruling, every detail. He laid out a meticulously organized binder, tabs color-coded by subject matter. I've read through 50 years of local zoning codes, studied every boundary dispute in Monterey County since 1990, and reviewed every permit application Madsen Development has ever filed. The judge's expression shifted from amusement to disbelief as he examined the documents. Each page was highlighted, annotated, cross-referenced with precision that would put seasoned attorneys to shame. This aerial photograph, Clint continued, pulling out a large image, shows my property line from 1992. And this one, he placed another beside it, shows how Madsen's development gradually encroached onto my land. Notice the dates, Your Honor. They didn't make a mistake. They did it deliberately, month by month, hoping I wouldn't notice. Parker, the opposition's lawyer, jumped to his feet. Your Honor, these photographs could have been taken from anywhere. Each one, Clint cut him off, is certified by the county surveyor's office. The timestamps and coordinates are right there at the bottom. Or did you think I wouldn't know to get them authenticated? The judge leaned forward, studying the evidence with new eyes. The laughter that had filled the courtroom earlier was gone, replaced by a tense silence. He looked at Clint, then back at the documents, then at Clint again. Mr. Eastwood, the judge's voice had lost its condescending tone. I admit I may have misjudged your preparation for this case. Clint nodded slightly, but he wasn't done. He pulled out another document, this one bearing the official seal of the California State Bar. And while we're on the subject of preparation, Your Honor, you might want to take a look at this. The document Clint presented wasn't just any legal paper. It was a detailed analysis of Madsen Development's history of property disputes, conducted by the State Bar's investigation unit. As the judge read through it, his face grew increasingly grave. Over the past decade, Clint explained, his voice carrying the weight of truth, Madsen Development has been involved in 17 similar cases, all of them settled out of court, all of them buried under confidentiality agreements. But I didn't settle, and I won't be silenced. The developer, Madsen, who had been slouching arrogantly in his chair, suddenly sat up straight. His face had turned pale. Beside him, Parker frantically flipped through his own files, realizing they were facing something they hadn't prepared for. An opponent who had done his homework better than they had. Let me show you exactly how they did it, Clint continued, spreading out a series of timeline photos. January 2023. They started construction within their boundaries. March 2023. They moved the fence 6 feet onto my property. May 2023. Another 4 feet. They thought I wouldn't notice because I'm just an old man. The judge, who had been studying the evidence with increasing intensity, removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Mr. Parker, he addressed Madsen's attorney, do you have any response to these allegations? Parker stood, adjusting his tie nervously. Your Honor, these are mere coincidences. Property lines can be complicated. Complicated? Clint's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Let me show you something else that's not complicated at all. He pulled out one final piece of evidence, an internal memo from Madsen Development, dated before construction began. As he read it aloud, the color drained from Madsen's face. The memo detailed their strategy. Target properties owned by elderly residents. Move boundaries gradually. Offer settlements if caught. The judge's face darkened with each word. He no longer saw a 94-year-old actor playing at being a lawyer. He saw a man who had uncovered a pattern of systematic exploitation and had the courage to stand up against it. "Your Honor," Clint said, his voice firm and resolute, "I may be old, but that just means I've had more time to learn the difference between right and wrong. And what's happening here, this is wrong." The tension in the courtroom could be cut with a knife as Judge Bridger set down the internal memo. His earlier mockery now replaced with visible regret. He looked at Clint Eastwood, seeing him truly for the first time. "Mr. Eastwood," the judge began, his voice heavy with realization, "I owe you an apology. When you walked into my courtroom, I saw what I wanted to see, an aging actor out of his depth. I was wrong." Clint stood quietly, his posture straight despite his 94 years. The same dignity that had carried him through 6 decades in Hollywood now commanded the courtroom's complete attention. "Your Honor," Clint responded, his voice carrying decades of wisdom, "I didn't come here for an apology. I came here because somewhere along the way, we started believing that age makes us weak, that getting older means giving up. But let me tell you something about age." The room hung on his every word as he continued. "Age taught me patience. It taught me to look closer, dig deeper. While they thought I was too old to fight back, I was actually gathering evidence. While they laughed at my years, I was using decades of experience to see through their schemes. You see, age isn't a weakness. It's a weapon, if you know how to use it." He turned to face Madsen directly, his blue eyes sharp with conviction. "You picked the wrong old man to steal from." Judge Bridger leaned forward, his demeanor completely transformed. "Mr. Parker, do you have anything to add in your client's defense?" Parker stood, then sat back down, defeated. The evidence was overwhelming, and now the judge who had once mocked Clint Eastwood was looking at Madsen Development with the kind of scrutiny that could unravel their entire operation. "In light of the evidence presented," Judge Bridger announced, his voice firm, "this court finds in favor of Mr. Eastwood. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into Madsen Development's other property dealing." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as justice was served, not by complex legal maneuvering, but by the steady hand of a man who refused to back down, regardless of his age. As the dust settled in the Monterey County Courthouse, the impact of what had just happened began to ripple through the legal community. The verdict wasn't just a victory for Clint Eastwood. It was a wake-up call for an entire industry that had grown too comfortable exploiting the elderly. Judge Bridger's final ruling was decisive. Madsen Development would not only have to remove all construction from Clint's property, but also pay substantial damages. More importantly, the judge ordered an immediate review of all their previous settlements involving elderly property owners. "Mr. Eastwood," Judge Bridger addressed him directly, his voice carrying genuine respect, "your actions here today have exposed something far larger than a simple property dispute. You've shown us that justice doesn't have an age limit." The headlines the next day told the story. Eastwood's greatest role yet, champion of justice. But the real story wasn't in the newspaper. It was in the dozens of calls that started pouring into local law offices. Other elderly residents coming forward with similar stories of property encroachment. Within weeks, Madsen Development's empire began to crumble. Other victims, emboldened by Clint's victory, started speaking up. The company's stock plummeted as investors distanced themselves from the scandal. The old man they had tried to bully had triggered an avalanche of accountability. Back in his Carmel home, Clint stood at the edge of his property, looking out at the land he had protected. A young reporter asked him if he felt vindicated by the outcome. "You know what I feel?" Clint responded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I feel like I just showed every senior citizen out there something important. Your age isn't a weakness. Your experience, your wisdom, your patience, those are strengths. And sometimes, the biggest mistake someone can make is underestimating an old man who's got nothing left to prove." The Clint Eastwood who walked out of that courtroom wasn't just a Hollywood legend. He had become something more. He had become a symbol of what happens when wisdom meets courage, when experience confronts injustice. In his final remarks to the press, Clint delivered words that would resonate far beyond the steps of the Monterey courthouse. You know, in all my years of making movies, I've played a lot of characters fighting for justice, but sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with guns or fists. They're fought with patience, with determination, and with the kind of wisdom that only comes from living long enough to know what's worth fighting for. He paused, a slight smile crossing his weathered face, then added, "And to anyone out there who thinks age makes you powerless, remember this. The older the lion gets, the less he has to prove, but the more dangerous he becomes." Today, Clint Eastwood's victory stands as a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, regardless of age. His story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't youth or strength. It's the unwavering determination of someone who's seen enough of life to know exactly where to draw the line. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that age is never a barrier to justice. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch out for the most.